Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here with Stone Payton, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio. And Stone, this is going to be a fun one.
Hey, this is going to be a lot of fun. Please join me in welcoming to the broadcast. First up on Atlanta Business Radio today, founder and principal with Intuit Factory, Mr. Roop Singh. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Well, Roop, we're here because of the folks at the Robinson College of Business from GSU. We've been working with them quite a bit over the last year or so. And it came to our attention that they're starting a kind of a blockchain strategy event, and your firm's kind of running it, or you're partnering with them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we partnered with Robinson College of Business to launch this first of its kind in-person blockchain strategy bootcamp. It's a 4-day bootcamp that goes into a lot of details on grounding you in blockchain technology and helping you understand, is this a threat or opportunity or a risk for companies and entrepreneurs alike?
Now, Stone and I just had the pleasure of being at the FinTech South event that was here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium a week or two ago. And there, it seemed like it was financial fintech event. So it was financial technology firms from all over the world. And quite a few of them were mentioning blockchain. Stone, I can't speak for you, but...
we did a whole block of interviews and they were off the chain.
That's it. I don't think that's what they meant, but maybe you can educate us a little bit and explain maybe a little blockchain for dummies.
Well, we'll try not to go off the chain here. But yeah, blockchain has been very popular. Last year was probably the most hype it has received, from Forbes to Wall Street Journal to Fortune Magazine to Harvard Business Review to World Economic Forum at Davos. Everyone's been talking about blockchain, and it's not a surprise. You know, fintech has been a leading industry to lead the charge on this new foundational technology. But if you really start researching, you will find that over 30 industries are being disrupted, and there's plenty of companies. I have a bunch here that I can share that have invested in blockchain technology and actually are at a stage of doing either proof of concepts or even launching commercial products. And some have even been in adoption already.
Now, there's talk of cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency, I believe, uses blockchain, but cryptocurrency and blockchain are two separate things.
Wonderful.
Right?
I couldn't have said it better. So here's how I like to say it. Both came from the same roots. If you go back to the origins, blockchain was first really well used in terms of distributed networks plus encryption in a cryptocurrency, which we now know as Bitcoin. So to me, they have linked trajectories because they have the same origins, but they have distinct destinies.
And then the way someone explained it to me, which I thought was pretty clear, but you can tell me how accurate this is. The person said, if I give you $1, you know that I gave you $1. Mm-hmm. And that all blockchain does is create transparency to see the path of that dollar from its origin to wherever it's at right now, where everybody can see all of the steps.
Right, exactly. That's quite well said. Let's explore that a little bit. So let's say if I do give you $1, the question I have for you is, how do you know that I actually gave you $1 at what time?
Right. So I have it in my hand and I can look at the clock.
Right. Perfect. That was the old way of doing things. Now, if we increase the number of transactions, the model that we have been following in the world for the last 200-300 years is, let's say the four of us have a set of transactions. I gave you $1, you gave him 20, Stone gave Chad another 50. How do we keep track of this? Back in the day, we used to write it in our own paper. Mm-hmm. And then we got to this centralized authority, which is the banking model. And we said, okay, whatever the bank said, a centralized authority who we all trust and believe, is the true state of the transactions. If bank said Stone give you $50, that's what it must be, mm-hmm. right? So now let me propose a different idea. Let's say that we have these transactions, and as they happen in the moment, we actually publish those transactions on the share wall in front of us. We all can see it. It is visible to everybody who's been part of those transactions, and maybe even perhaps people who have not been part of those transactions. So it's very open and transparent. And then we publish them as soon as they happen on the particular timestamp. And we go further and we say, let's encrypt them, make them immutable, make them something that cannot be adapted or changed or tampered with in any such capacity. So what that does is gives us a shared state of the said ledger. And that, in essence, is blockchain.
And then the benefits of that level of transparency, I can see what you tell me the benefits of being able to see every transaction in that ledger.
Right. So there's a few. One, let's talk about ownership. Because this quote unquote ledger is not owned by any one central authority, any one institution, any one entity, we all collectively own it. This is one of the big points of discussion. Oh, who owns the ledger? Well, we all have decided a set of rules that we now call consensus mechanism, and we all own this ledger together. Whoever is participant in this particular network, no one person, entity, or authority decides what is the true state of the ledger. And also they don't own it, so they cannot tamper with it. The other big improvement from the previous paradigm is these transactions are now considered to be immutable. Immutable means they cannot be changed. So if we had a transaction, let's say 10 years ago, we still have a record of it and we can go back to it and we know that nobody would have tampered with it. It wouldn't have changed ever. And we can believe that transaction to be true. Does that make sense?
Right. So it's like when I bought my house, I can look back and see the other people who have purchased that land.
Absolutely.
Up to a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely. So what it allows us, you shared a very good example, is to create a certificate of ownership, if you will, right? Or certificate of authorship in some other area. So let's take real estate. If I could prove that there is this title of this particular land, which has these particular details, and you, Lee, are the current owner of this particular land. Now, if you go back to a lot of developing countries, land title fraud is a very common issue. And in fact, it is, if you imagine the scale of economic development some countries have achieved, the basis of it was fundamentally that people could own land and we could prove the ownership of land, and then we could get more economic development as a result of that. In developing countries, that is still a big challenge where there is so much fraud and the record keeping is not really efficient. So what blockchain can allow us to do specifically in real estate is to easily go back and check on all those land title records, as you said, and then it becomes more easier to transfer this to the next owner.
Mm-hmm. So now I can see in some industries where transactions occur that transactionally where it's like I'm buying this object from you and now I own this object and then I sell it to someone, then we all can see that path. But blockchain's going beyond that, right? Like blockchain's also in the media or blockchain's also in healthcare.
Absolutely.
So is that just to trace kind of the drug, the path of the ingredients of the drug to being the drug to the patient? Like where else is it touching?
You are amazing. I don't need to do this. You know all of this already. So what you've just described, I call it the chain of custody use case. So you can track an asset. An asset could be anything. You know, before the show started, we were talking to Chad about diamonds. Diamond could be an asset, or a particular drug could be an asset. Once we've established this particular asset is authentic and we've put it on the chain, that's step number one. After that, we can ensure that we track this asset throughout its journey. Wherever it goes, we put those transactions on the chain. So this has huge implications on supply chain, essentially moving all the goods on this planet. And then furthermore, looking at specifically, let's say it is drugs, to track drugs, how they are being distributed globally. And it can also help in identifying if there are fraudulent drugs, if there are drugs that are getting into people that shouldn't be getting to people. So there's so many implications of being able to prove the authenticity of a particular asset. So another way to look at this is we have come from a world of the internet. Internet has been around a few years, and it was the internet of information. It was the age of sharing information, and information sharing became easier to do. And you saw the implication that on the media industry, on the publication industry, on the video streaming industry, etc. This is the second evolution of the internet, where now we can have things called digital assets, and we can put them on the chain. And that allows us to share value. We are going beyond just sharing information. We can share assets like diamonds, or track fish, or track wine, or track drugs. And that allows us to have an internet of value, which is a whole another evolution of the internet.
Now, you mentioned the chain. The chain that's like saying the cloud, right? Like the chain isn't an actual thing that exists. It's a digital thing that exists.
You mean to say it's not a physical thing that exists?
Well, it's not. Well, there's not one chain, is there?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is hundreds of chains now. And in fact, if we start opening up that Pandora's box, there are public chains that can be publicly, you can be a part of that network because it's open and public. One example would be the Bitcoin blockchain or the Ethereum blockchain, but you can also develop a permission-based blockchain. So let's say the four of us decided to do this together, and we said, well, nobody else can join us. And it's only the four of us that need to see the data, and we decide on what the rules are. So we can start our own private permission-based blockchain. Now, there are proponents of that in the enterprise world that say this will be the future. And there are proponents of the public blockchain that say that would be the future. There is this sense also that if a lot of businesses are not on public chains, which are now being almost treated as public infrastructure, so to say, then they will lose out on the innovation and the advances in the technology from a public chain perspective. If you want to go back to another era, and you mentioned cloud computing, so let's go back even before when we had the internet first, there was this thing called the intranets. Companies were scared and they didn't want to share their private data on the internet. And they said, okay, let's just develop our own little thing within our own company and let's call it the intranet, right? You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. So I think we are seeing somewhat of that evolution as well, where people are getting more comfortable with this new evolution. We went from internet to intranet to cloud computing, which is slightly more distributed. And then now we're getting to a more decentralized world, where it's even more distributed and decentralized than cloud computing as well.
Now, does it have a use, like you mentioned, all four of us decide to do something together? Let's say we decide to start a company. Mm-hmm. And then we each put in $10,000. Mm-hmm. So we have a transaction. We create our own little mini blockchain, which mm-hmm. is possible, right? That has a value of $40,000. Mm-hmm. And then we say, this is our own thing. And then I decide, you know what? I'd like to not play anymore. Mm-hmm. Can we open that blockchain to the public and let somebody else see if they want to pay $12,000 for my share of the company? Can we use this as a kind of a substitute for shares or how people are, kind of funding businesses?
Right. So we're moving towards what we call tokenization. So you could tokenize your asset, right? And this is slightly different from shares of a company, because when you buy shares of a company, you're actually buying an equity stake in the company. Whereas when you issue tokens of your network, you're not issuing equity. Just a very clear distinction. Having said that, we can go to your paradigm, which is, well, can other people participate in it in some way or fashion, right? And that's what we have seen now with so many companies in these new advents of capital raising mechanism called the ICOs, or token issuance events, wherein we can issue a set number of tokens, and we can issue them to the general public or to accredited investors, and people can invest. They can buy these tokens and they can invest. Now, there are a lot of regulatory concerns around that, especially in the United States. But what we have seen is, if you look at the state of Wyoming, for example, they've issued just very recently, my guess is about 2 months ago, that they have ratified and issued 4 laws which establish a new class of assets called the utility tokens, which allow us to do things like this.
So then say we issue, our group of 4 issues 100 tokens. Mm-hmm. And then how do we set the price? Or we just make up a price and then the public can buy or not?
Right. So I want to mention 2 different distinctions here. One, if you are issuing these tokens with the intention of other people being able to leverage this as a security, meaning that they expect to get returns out of it, that's called a security token. If, on the other hand, this blockchain that we developed has a particular utility. Let's take an example of your radio show, and we say we will monetize all the content on the radio show. You've been doing it for years. You have so much content. People should be able to listen to it. We want to expand the reach. So let's issue these 100 tokens, and what people will get it. Let's set the price at $1, peg it to $1, just for argument's sake. So everybody who takes, let's say, 5 tokens now can view or listen to X number of content. So what we've done here is we are talking about the utility of your network and what it can allow for the participants or the users to do. And we are moving into the direction of utility token. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm making quite simplistic here. But once we have a utility-based network where we can successfully prove and ascertain that there is utility for people to join it, then all you're doing is you're saying, hey, here is a utility item. Here is a product or service that you can use. Why don't you people buy my service in advance in order to use this utility, in order to listen to the content, in order to utilize the service? And that's one way that we've seen happen.
And then after they've used that $5 worth of value, then it goes away, or what happens to it?
Yeah. So you bring up a very interesting point. As we've seen the advent of this technology, what we've also seen is advent of new business models. So because these things are really transforming the state of technology, we have now the ability to develop new business models, which is where you're going. So I think what needs to happen more and more, and we're seeing this already, is a lot of economic professionals, economists and such, coming together with technologists to create these new set of business models to see how we can develop this sort of environment and this incentive mechanism. So why should somebody buy even one token? And what happens to it when they have used it? Does it get synced? What is the source of the token in economic terms? And how do we keep this ecosystem thriving? How do we keep this set of individuals adopted and in sync with the network? And how do we ensure that we actually go beyond the basic business models that we have been used to?
Now, in this boot camp that you'll be running in, I believe the dates are June 15th, 16th, and June 22nd and 23rd. So what stuff are you going to cover? I mean, it gets into the weeds pretty quickly. Is this a kind of the basics of blockchain? Are you going to be getting into specifics on how a business can leverage this?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually going beyond blockchain 101. I think the industry is at a stage where we need more rational, more thought out strategies to implement this technology. So here's a few points that we would cover. We would ground you in blockchain technology and smart contract fundamentals. We will help you identify trends shaping the blockchain ecosystem. We'll help you discover and conduct critical analysis of your blockchain use cases. We'll help you identify whether blockchain is an opportunity, threat, or a risk for you. And you will learn about adjacent spaces. See, blockchain alone is not enough. We'll learn about how artificial intelligence, data analytics, and economics interact with this space. You will understand how decentralization, digital assets, token economics, self-sovereign identity are revolutionizing the internet. You'll evaluate blockchain companies and token issuance offerings using our proprietary diagnostic model. And we'll understand how this intersection of business and technology can be adopted in a tactical way or in a strategic way.
Now, who are the ones who should attend? Like, are they the CEOs? Are they just consultants? Who should attend this?
So this is really designed for senior executives and seasoned entrepreneurs who don't have much time on their hands to sit and study this for months on end. So this is a nice packaged offering where you can go into the details pretty quickly, and eventually we'll end up towards the last module. We'll end up with looking at different business models, as you mentioned. So it's really CIOs, CTOs, chief digital officers, or VP of digital transformation, VP of process transformation, VP of strategy. And on the entrepreneur side, seasoned entrepreneurs who have companies and technical products that are in the technology space now, but they would like to pivot in the blockchain space. We will help them to identify those areas. And the third segment of people that are already registering, they are in the investment community. So this has become a huge vehicle for investment, and we will help you identify your investment thesis and help you understand which one of these horses to back. Investment folks get all kinds of pitches all day long. Which ones are the ones that will really be adopted in the future? And we'll look at macro trends and do a critical analysis of each of these investment theses as well.
So financial services, banking, we mentioned healthcare and supply chain. I threw in media, but you tell me if that's valid or not.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example. You have so much content today. We all use platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. We put our words, our pictures, our thoughts on it. Do you get paid for it today?
I don't know. Are you going to pay at the end of this? It was free to come here.
I would be. So there is a platform called Steemit, which is a blockchain-based media platform that you can monetize your content on today, which is a radical different business model than the Facebook of the world or the Instagrams of the world, where you just publish content and you don't get any benefit for it, versus the companies who actually use your content to sell it to sponsors, right? So you can find, this is one example in the media industry. There's plenty more, where let's talk about another one. Let's say you are an artist. You produce music, you have songs, or you produce music videos. Back in the day, it was a big challenge for artists to even distribute their content. And we sort of alleviated that with the advent of the internet. You can go on YouTube now and put your content out and be found and be known. And there are plenty of people who made a career and got a lot of fame just on that, which is an amazing thing. The second evolution of this is, can we track your content and ensure that you are getting the credit for it? As the royalties are issued, as the content is distributed and used, maybe in countries far away, can we track and give you the credit and the royalties for it? And blockchain media companies are doing that. In fact, Spotify recently acquired a company called MediaChain, whose only intention was to understand how blockchain can impact the media industry.
So it sounds like the boot camp, this is the first of its kind, right? The first of its kind in-person kind of boot camp like this?
Absolutely.
And it'll be held at the Robinson College of Business?
Yeah, it's in the Bucket Center of the Robinson College of Business.
And if somebody wanted to learn more, the website?
Yeah, the website is robinson.gsu.edu/blockchain strategy.
And then you can go there and you can sign up or learn more about it. Your day job, though, is with Intuit Factory?
Yes, I'm the founder and principal of this consulting and education firm in the blockchain space called Intuit Factory.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Keep up the good work, man.
Thank you. It's been exciting.
Hey, how about staying with us? We got one more guest we're going to visit with.
Yeah, I would love to hear.